Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It is Monday, April 22nd, 2024 at 7 p.m. Happy Earth Day. Tonight we have a series of committee meetings, first of which is Planning and Development, chaired by Alan Swank, and including Jessica Thomas, Solveig Spjelnes, and Michael Wood.
Thank you, President Crowell. Nice to see you back. Jessica's down there at different times, so you can come join us. Tonight we have three items under the Planning and Development Committee. The first two dealing with rezoning requests, both of which will require, if council deems it appropriate to move these forward, both of these will require a public hearing at a later date. The third one revolves around the Hocking River, and we won't be rezoning anything down there. First item on the agenda deals with proposed rezoning on Elliott Street. For those of you who do not have the map of Athens memorized, if you're at the Stimson Avenue roundabout headed towards uptown, you proceed on Stimson Avenue, you get to what used to be a BP station there, and you make a left like you're going to campus. That is Elliott Street. Primarily residential on the right side, which would be the west side, and a combination of residential and business on the left side. On the 6th of March, the Athens City Planning Commission met to review case 2401, Elliott Street rezoning request. Planning Commission voted 3-1 to recommend to Athens City Council approval of case 2401 as follows. Rezoning of the southern three parcels that the applicant requested to a B1 zone. The Planning Commission also recommends rezoning to B1 three additional parcels to the south that are not owned by the applicant. This recommendation is contingent upon approval from the property owner of the additional three parcels to the south. What does all of that mean? As you start down Elliott Street, you get to that first street. It's kind of an alley, kind of a street where you can make a left and go up by the AmVets, Atco, and eventually end up at Jackie O's. Just past that, on the left-hand side, which would be the east side, is a gas distribution company. And next to that is a parking lot. Next to that is a house. Next to the house is a vacant lot. And next to that vacant lot is another house. You then come upon a large parking lot, which is on the back side of Athens Mold and Machine. What the applicant, who is here today, is asking is not the parking lot, the first thing you come to, but the house, the lot in between, and the next house be rezoned from an R3 to a B1. However, in speaking with the applicant today, he was not able to attend the Planning Commission meeting on the 6th, and what really he would like is to leave the parking lot as a B3. The first house would go to a B1, the lot in between would stay as a B3, and the other house would go to a B1. So that's where we are today. Again, this was recommended by the Planning Commission. So I guess it might be most appropriate to start with a comment by Mr. DeLuca on the parcel in between that he would like to have not as a B1, but would prefer as a B3 for various business reasons. So Mr. DeLuca, if you would be so kind as to share that with us, we'd appreciate it today.
Yeah, so basically there's the two properties there that have houses on them already, and that would be 32 and 36. Elliott, which a B1 would be fine on them. There's no plans on change. Now the parking lot that I have in existence down there is already a B3, which is right next to 36, which is 38, but that's not involved in what we're talking about. However, The point being is that zone is a B3. The house next to it would be a B1, and then there's an empty space in between the two houses. If everybody understands this, and I know it's a little tricky. But basically, the space in between, I was requesting to be a B3. I would be fine with the houses being B1, because that's, basically what they are. But just talking to Mr. Swank, that's what my intention is.
This evening, we do have two members of the Planning Commission here, so I guess I would defer to the mayor and Director Stone as to if the Planning Commission were to consider this, and again, we're saying this because Mr. DeLuca was not at or able to be at the last planning meeting, therefore was not able to offer any input. What would be the process? Or are we stuck with what we stuck with, and then council, can we modify it? I'm deferring to you, sir.
Yeah, so, thank you, Councilmember Swank. No, what the Planning Commission has done is we voted on what we had in front of us at the time and moving forward. And it's just a recommendation to City Council. City Council can amend, can certainly change. You don't have to be in compliance, or you don't have to take our recommendation at the end of the day, quite honestly. But we did spend, approximately 4 weeks going over this. In Planning Commission, just as an educational moment for everybody, things come to the Planning Commission as a communication from an appellate, and we take up that communication, and then 2 weeks later, we can decide to bring it forward as a case or not. There might be times when we need more information on whatever the issue is, but we brought this forward as a case, and we had a lengthy discussion. You should have the documents in front of you that pertain to all the minutes from the Planning Commission. But again, to your question, council can either choose to accept that. Council can amend it to much like Mr. DeLuca is asking for at this point in time. The other thing I want to mention, because it was in the motion, was to also have a conditional rezoning of Athens Mold and Machine parking lot, which is three parcels. And we voted on that to be B1 as well, to be consistent with everything else in that Elliott Street corridor. I just had a communication earlier today with the owner, one of the co-owners of Athens Mold and Machine, Samuel Thornton, and he felt that would be a better use of that parking lot area as well, to have that rezoned B1. Again, that is a condition that we put into the what we ended up adopting by a vote of 3-1. I'm going to hand it over to Director Stone to fill in any more gaps.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Just a couple other clarifications. So the of note, council can take this up and can change the recommendation of Planning Commission as they move forward. If council goes against the recommendation of Planning Commission, there has to be a 2/3 vote. And that's the one caveat associated with zoning. It's not a simple majority. It's actually a 2/3 vote to do something different than what Planning Commission recommended. As mentioned, Planning Commission recommended to take the 3 parcels in question and change them to B1. As well as if the property owner to the south agreed to change those to B1 as well. So what Planning Commission forwarded to you was a recommendation to change 6 parcels in a row from currently being R3 to B1. I don't personally feel strongly about B3 versus B1. Certainly if council sees fit to pick up what Mr. DeLuca has requested and go ahead and go with a B3, we just thought B1 would provide a little bit better buffer in the area. But of note, I did have the code director do a little bit of research in the differences between a B1 and B3, just to make it clear. B1 is a little less restrictive, or I'm sorry, B3 is a little less restrictive than B1. Here are the items that can occur in a B3 that cannot occur in a B1, specifically night operations. So, think a facility that has like a second or third shift. drive-throughs, like restaurant drive-throughs, hospitals, animal hospitals, commercial recreation, building trades and printing trades, bottling works, contractors' yards, sexually oriented businesses, and agricultural uses. There's also a slight difference in bulk controls. So a B1, the max height right now is 35 feet and 2.5 stories, and a B3, the max height is 45 feet and 3.5 stories. In a B1, there's a 25-foot front yard setback. In a B3, there's no front yard setback. Interestingly, for side yard setback, there's a reverse. In a B1, there is no side yard setback, but in a B3, there's a 10-foot, 10 foot on either side B3 setback. So that's the specifics on the difference between a B3 and a B1. But like I said, I don't have a strong opinion. It's just if you vote differently than the planning commission as you take this forward, it's supposed to be 2/3 in order for it to carry.
For a point of reference, those, what I'll call beach houses over on Stewart Street, how tall are those? Do you have any idea off the top of your head?
I don't. I know that I'd have to take a look at what those are. You know, a lot of that is due to flood damage prevention and why they're that high. That, you know, and we're going to talk about flood damage prevention, I think, in the
Third
city
item,
and safety
yeah.
services, the fourth item, actually. Well, both third and fourth item. There's a requirement to get the first finished floor 1 foot above the 100-year floodplain, and so I think that's one of the reasons why those are a little higher. But I don't know what their heights are. I can get that information for you.
Members of the committee, questions, comments about the proposal, the request? As the mayor said, I too have talked with Mr. Thornton today. Mr. Thornton and my son were classmates out at Athens High School. Known Sam for quite some time, and he says as long as it doesn't restrict my business, he currently uses it for a parking lot, rents it by the year, which is in a sense a good thing because it keeps a lot of those cars off of our narrow city streets on the east side and puts them in a controlled, safe area. But says as long as it doesn't restrict the business, as the mayor said, he's perfectly fine going to B1, so that contingency has been met.
So the new request is to go B1, B3, B1 on 3 adjacent properties?
Mr. DeLuca?
Is that
Yes.
within the norms of something we'd do?
I think you could. I don't know that necessarily. A future owner might have a restriction if they wanted to have all 3 parcels have, say, 1 building be built on them with a, you know, and just the use would have to be pretty much tied to the B1 use if that were the case. So, but if, you know, Mr. Luca is the owner right now, and if that's suitable to him, certainly that's suitable to me.
Other members, yes.
So, just to clarify why you wanted the B3 rather than the B1.
Well, it just matches the use of the property for the most part. I mean, that's, you know, as of the plan on at this point, you know, I'm not sure, but it certainly, you know, maximizes my usage for it.
So for your business use, not just for selling it down the road?
No.
Okay,
I
so-
have no intention of selling.
So you're not clear what you're gonna use the property necessarily?
I mean, I have some ideas, but until, you know, you get approvals and all that kind of stuff, it really doesn't mean anything.
Mr. DeLuca, if I'm not mistaken, you purchased all these properties within the last 4 or 5 months?
Yes.
Okay. So I just saw the Larry Conrad signs. I think it was Larry Conrad signs
Yes.
sold on 2 of those
Yeah.
yesterday when I looked at the property. Remember Wood, were you about to make a comment?
Yeah, can you tell us what those ideas are that you're,
I mean, you know, as of now, I mean, we're looking at a possible warehouse, where, you know, it was an idea. There's been a talk of, you know, possibly like a donut shop with a drive-through. There's been office space. I mean, you know, a few different options.
So a B3 allows for drive-throughs, but that's going to run up against all of the other distance from, is that just R1s that have drive-through restrictions on how far the speaker and all of that? Or,
Correct.
okay, so the R2 next to it won't be a problem?
I don't think there's any R2 in this
Maybe
area.
B1
Or
next to
R3,
it.
I'm sorry. Is that red tolls?
I have to double check on distance from an R3. I know in R1, there's a distance requirement. I don't know if it's a distance from a residential zone. I can look up the code real quick if that's helpful.
I forgot to look that up earlier.
Other members of council? Member McCary.
Thank you. I am curious, it sounds like the planning commission reviewed this based on the assumption of a B1, with B3 not having been the focus. Are there concerns about light pollution? Am I correct in understanding that B3s allow for taller lights? Is that what it is? Or taller buildings? Okay. So there's no light pollution concern about a B3 versus a B1?
That wasn't a conversation that came up with the planning commission.
Still would need to meet code, though. Any other comments at this point in time? Mr. DeLuca, we will bring this forward at the next regular meeting. At that point in time, council can either take the recommendation of the planning commission to make it a B1, or we could amend that with a 6-1 vote, 6-1 vote. But either case, we'll take that under consideration, and again, we will have to have a public hearing, which we will schedule through the clerk's office, at which time we'll take public input. In the interim, should you have any additional input, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor.
No, I just strongly encourage council to read through the documents that came forward from the planning commission's communications, because there's lots of communication that took place. And then also during the case period, so that you have a full understanding as to what the planning commission was thinking when we made our decision. But again, this was indicated, with a 6-1 vote.
Yes.
So that just reminded me of that. So this would make it, if it's B1, then it's legal conforming. But if it's B3, it's legal non-conforming.
Correct.
Which creates more issues down the line, keep things,
If you keep those houses there, yeah.
okay, if there's changes down the line, okay. I think that's it for me.
That's fine. Yeah. Mr. Luke, anything else you'd like to share with us? Okay. Oh,
I just want to point out a procedure thing. I won't be here for the next regular session, so it won't be 6-1. It'll be
First reading.
I don't know, what, 5?
well, it requires 6 votes, correct?
Yes,
not-
6 votes.
It's first reading.
Yeah, it's first reading, too.
it'll come up as
Yes,
first
yeah,
reading.
First reading, yeah.
I won't be here for the second one,
Well, let's
and it
just-
might not make it back for the third.
See there.
Yeah.
You'll
like
be,
that.
you'll be back by the third reading unless that doesn't leak chili Laurel.
It gets too sticky, I might not.
That's just first reading. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Lucan.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Second item on the agenda is another zoning issue, and again, this will, if we move it forward, will require a public hearing. And this involves parcels over on the far east side. So if you go out East State Street and get to Grand Park Boulevard, there's the Donwood Hyundai dealership. Let me get to the right page here, because these are massive files we have in front of us. What the request of the zoning, Debbie, where the heck is it here? Page is not loading. You don't have it in written form, do you? Okay. So this, the city has received a request for Title 23.09 zone change permit for the property located as parcel numbers, and they're very long numbers. The applicant, Grand Town Eden LLC, is requesting to change the zone of these properties from R2 to B3. The zone change permit has been reviewed by the Code Office of Planning Commission, case 2402, and motion was passed 5-0 to City Council, rezoning the 5 parcels to R3,
No, B3.
not B3. So paraphrase all of that. The request was to make these, they're currently R2, they're currently vacant lots, to change them to B3. The Planning Commission voted 5-0 not to make them B3, but to make them B1.
Okay.
Now, R3? Oh, okay, R3, sorry. The purpose of this, yeah, R3, you're correct. The purpose of the request was to allow the applicant to put parking in that area. So as you make if you make the left on Graham Park, dealership's on your right, behind there's this grassy area, make that parking. And the purpose of the parking is for the business to have the ability to increase on-site inventory, more cars to sell. Came before the Planning Commission. There was significant, I should say, opposition, myself included, to making it a B3. One of the major reasons was what happens down the road. And for any of those of you who have made the left on Avon rather than Grand Park and seen the debacle at the end of Avon, it was scary what Grand Park might turn into down the road. That has no bearing on the current ownership of the property. Mr. Wood keeps a clean property, but what about the next one? So the Far East Side Neighborhood Association's vice president, representing the executive committee of that association, testified in front of the Planning Commission, and as a compromise, and I would call it a compromise, recommended that it be an R3 so that the parking lot could still go in. The inventory could be increased, but some integrity of the neighborhood could be preserved. So that's where we are at this point in time. Members of council, comments or questions? And again, we have two members of the Planning Commission here, so it makes for a neat conversation. Yes.
Well, as we did with the earlier one, if you could explain exactly the R3 for everybody, so that everybody knows what we're talking about.
R3 is residential.
Yep.
Provides for all different types of residents, a single-family home. In fact, I think just to be safe, I'm going to defer to Director Stone so that I don't say something that's not accurate, as reflective in the code.
Sure, it's a less restrictive zoning than an R2 or an R1, and that you get all types of residential, multifamily, duplexes, as well as single family. I mean, in general, the intent behind R3 is to have a higher density, so multifamily facility, that's the kind of goal of zoning a place R3, but you are allowed to have duplexes or single family homes as well, but it's a residential use.
So parking is a residential use?
It's a permitted use in that particular, I'm sorry.
Okay, I just want to get some clarification, thank you.
Right, it's a permitted use in an R3.
Okay, thank you.
Member Wood.
Yeah, I'm curious, the intent here then would be to take out these homes, these 5 homes or so? And
No, it's vacant lots.
the vacant lots?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, would be nice flat level lots.
Right.
And by going R3, it would open it up to various types of housing if they wanted to. But in this case, the applicant would like to put in the parking area so that they can place additional cars on there, so they're able to sell those.
We're not talking about losing any housing stock out of that.
No existing housing stock,
Okay.
just existing possible housing locations. Member Kleinfelder.
In the time that it would be a parking lot, would this lot be better protected in some way by having R3 designation rather than a B designation?
Yes, the R3 is restrictive into what percent of the area can be covered by parking.
Okay.
And if the applicant would want to ask for a variance above and beyond that, or had to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, restrictions could be placed on that, including fencing, vegetation, and the like.
Okay.
Because it does butt right up against the houses on both Eden and Graham Park.
Okay. Would it stretch across the whole block?
It could, yes, yes. I believe we have a representative from the business that is applying for this. And you have to excuse me, I've forgotten your last name, sir.
David Mott.
Mr. Mott, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Swain. First, you did an excellent job with my presentation. Thank you.
Well, we've sat here 3 times now, haven't we?
Yes. Councilmember Clodfelter, just one comment to your question. I believe the maximum lot coverage in an R3 is 60%. So even full block coverage would have limits. Could either be 60% for each lot, or the entire thing could be resurveyed as one large lot and then 60% paved. So there's not actually a physical way to pave it from curb to curb.
Just, okay, any questions for Mr. Mott, since we have him here, much like Mr. DeLuca in the previous?
As I said, Mr. Swank did a fine job with my presentation.
Yeah. And I have to say, Mr. Mott presented a good plan, and I just got a text before I came up from the Vice President of FINA that if this were to go through, people like the grass area and all that, but we also like business. And anyone who knows anything about car dealerships, they want to be located on busy streets so they get lots of traffic and people can see the cars. And this would be one way to allow the dealership to do that. And we're hoping if they get this extra space that we can get those cars that are right on top of East State Street back a little bit, but that's another issue for another day.
So you would be okay with the R3 designation versus the B3?
My client has a preference for the B3 because it would keep it consistent with the zoning along East State Street. It would just keep the entire property zoned so it can be used together. For media purposes, the R3 would be adequate.
Okay.
And again, if this goes forward, we will have a public hearing on it. Thank you, Mr. Mott.
Thank you.
Item number 3, the Hocking River. Back in the, if we have the full complement of council members up here, back in the late 60s, when the Hocking River was rerouted, at least 4 of you, I don't think, were born yet. And the reason I say that is not to sound like an old man, but the fact that in the late 60s, when we mitigated or attempted to mitigate environmental issues, we didn't know what we know today in terms about the impact on the environment. Prior to the rerouting of the river in the late 60s, Athens often suffered devastating floods. In fact, that's one of the reasons on the New South Green, you have the walkways and you have the parking garages underneath. The river literally ran through where the New Baker Center is, through Ameritai Park, crossed there, right in front of what used to be the first tee on the golf course out to the river. But by rerouting it and creating a channel, we thought we had solved the problem of flooding, and by and large we had. However, over the last 60 years, we've created a lot of other problems, environmental problems, a lack of wildlife, sediment everywhere, basically deforestation of the canal. We, working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, that's what USACE stands for, that acronym, United States Army Corps of Engineers, we have an opportunity to participate as a partner in a study to see what we can do to fix the river, bring back the fish, bring back the vegetation, and something that if we can fix this, I may sign up and be the first person to do it, solve the safety issue at the old Whites Mill Dam. Right now, it is a death trap. But there is a possibility, we may find with this study and correcting it, that people can put in a canoe at Eclipse. Canoe all the way down, raft all the way down, even over that dam. But right now, don't do it. There's been too much loss of life. So what this is an opportunity for us to participate as a partner in a study, fiscal years 24 through 26, to look at environmental remediation of the riverbed, channel, and also to fix the problem at Whites Mill. I'll turn it over to Director Stone for additional comment and maybe some of the more specific details of the program.
Sure. Thank you, Member Swank. So, under Section 1135 is what they call it. It's a federal statute. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has authority to mitigate environmental damage from previous projects that the Corps has done for flood control or civil works or what have you. This project, or this section of the Hocking River from basically the Whites Mill location to Richland Avenue has been identified as a potential candidate to improve the waterway to make a more environmentally friendly waterway. You know, try to decrease water temperature, try to increase species, try to increase water oxygenation, et cetera, to improve the water quality and the aquatic life. The way these programs work is they start with a study that ultimately determines the course of action, and then at the end of that study period, there can be federal funding that goes for a project, and then that project would, you know, do the work that is identified in the study. For the study, the funding stream mechanism, it's a 50-50 split in cost between the federal government and a local partner, with the first $100,000 being paid for by the local entity. I'm sorry, the federal government, rather. This particular study, the cost to the city of Athens in total over a 3-year period would be, and this is estimated to be around $296,000, with the overall study being $814,000. So that, do the math, take $100,000 away from that, which is the first federal share, split it in half, and that's what the local share would be. And so what we're asking to be considered by this body is the agreement that the Corps of Engineers requires us to sign up for in order to participate in this program. And then number two, the authorization to expend the money necessary. Now, it's going to be over a 3-year period. We're requesting to do it out of the 755 fund, which is the stormwater fund. That fund was set up initially to deal with water quality, so I mean it's a logical source for that, and then the fund should be able to support this over a 3-year period. I'd be a little concerned if it was 1 year, but over a 3-year period, I think it's doable. So. And that's the extended information. Hopefully I covered what you wanted me to cover.
That's perfect. And the last point I think that Director Stone made is very, very important, because people are hearing the city's watching it's pennies, nickels, and dimes, which we are. This is not general fund money.
Correct.
This is from a special stormwater fund, which, if I believe, is itemized on our monthly utility bill in the amount of $1 or $2 that we're paying on this. And I would agree, if this was a 1-year ask, that would be stretching things. But over a 3-year period, it makes it very manageable. And do you anticipate that we will be able to continue with that fee on our monthly utility bill the same as it is, as opposed to an increase?
I have no intent to ask for an increase.
Great. Members of the committee? Yes, ma'am.
Well, as I've been driving by the river many times recently, I've thought, you know, in 2008 when I moved here, this was really pretty. It was a very attractive, it was a draw. I mean, it was really attractive. And it's just not that attractive right now. I mean, all that sediment, it looks pretty, it doesn't look good, let's put it that way. So am I hearing that, because I heard the word sediment, would this possibly alleviate some of that intrusive sediment that seems to, let's say, make that area less pretty?
I can certainly chime in on this. You know, this sediment is an issue unto itself. I mean, we're going to see sediment, you know, silting down the river, much like you would with any waterway over time, especially in our area, which back in the 1850s, 60s, you know, was completely denuded, which led to a lot of the silting in the Hocking prior to this 1969, 1970 project. Some of the things that they will look at, though, with this, under this, the feasibility study is, you know, option A is no action at all. Hopefully that's not where we land. Option B would be in-stream structures and riparian pollinator plantings. And then option C, based upon what they find, a fishway, in-stream structures, and riparian pollinator. So it would change potentially with where this feasibility study lands. It'll change the look and feel. Will it help with the silting? I mean, there's a number of sources where the silting is coming from. We see a lot of silting that comes down out of Coates Run. But hopefully this will help us better understand how to manage some of that over time. I think this will be a good project. I want to share a little bit more context with council. When we had the most recent, we had a tragedy. There's been several tragedies in this area, for sure, but there was the one that happened in 2016, where I recognized right away during a high water event, that the section in which people, unfortunately, thinking that this would be something interesting to do, to shoot this particular section, there's a reverse hydraulic right there, and we also don't 100% understand what is below the rock formation that constitutes White's Mill, as we all know it. The plan would not be to disrupt the look and feel of the geography with the fall itself, but whatever it is that's down below there could help with correcting some of the hazards that exist if someone were to try and go over the White's Mill Falls, especially near that reverse hydraulic. So I'm just sharing that with council because this is something that I know I have been very interested in since 2016, since we lost that 2016 tragedy. Director Stone and I have been engaging with the Corps of Engineers since that time. It's been a long, arduous process. It wasn't, nothing with the Corps of Engineers goes fast. Although we're at this point to where we now have this budget structure for doing a feasibility study, and I think now is our time to act. We can use the stormwater fund to be able to fund this over the course of 3 years. It does fit with the intent of that particular fund line. So, and again, just know that whatever the outcome is from the feasibility study and whatever actions could take place afterwards, know that this is a long-term project. We're talking into the 2030s or beyond for anything with the potential restructuring or repair along that waterway.
I'm
sorry.
I'm just curious, in your experience with the Army Corps of Engineers, when they do a feasibility study like this, how much do they take into account the desires of the community where the study's being conducted?
My understanding, it's a significant part of that. I mean, just like there's public input with the expenditure of any federal and state money and any local money, it's a significant portion of it. So now it has to work, right? I mean, the whole reason the Hocking River was moved is to create a flood control project. And what you couldn't do is a project that, make it change so much that you negated the impact of the flood control project. There's an entire government entity that was created to maintain that channel, to remove silt as best they can, insofar as they're permitted to by waterway regulations, called the Hocking Conservancy District, and they exist, and they're funded by the property tax, a rider on property taxes for properties that benefited from that project. So they can't change it that much, but as far as the impact and the desires of the local community, it's a significant portion of it.
Is Ohio University involved in any of this?
I mean, it would be my intent that they participate in the study, that the engineering school gets to participate from a hydraulics perspective, data collection. It would be a major desire of mine that they participate. Do you want them to, or do you not want them to?
I'd like for them to just do everything.
Oh,
And pay for it.
I mean, they're the big beneficiaries of this whole thing. I mean, like you say, there's 4 of us here who were around when all this happened, and I remember when the Corps was trying to sell the whole idea to the citizens. It was Ohio University that was going to be the big beneficiary of it. It was their property that was always getting flooded. It was Porter Hall basement that went underwater. It was Grover Center, and the basketball courts were destroyed by the water. It was the dorms that were wiped out. I mean, most everybody else was up on, high and dry. That, it's flooded, but I'm not really particularly affected by it. It was OU. I mean, they were the big losers on that thing, and they really pushed it. And then when I came in as an undergraduate student, geology department, we started doing studies of what the Corps and the Soil Conservation Service was coming up with in terms of siltation and runoff and so on, checking their figures against our figures. And, I mean, everything checked out. I mean, the science is the science. It says what it says. But my point is, it was OU that really benefited from all that. And it seems to me it would be very nice if OU would come to the plate and ante up and say, you're right, we're indebted to you, here's a bunch of money, do it. Do you think they will?
If I may, Member Reisner, OU does pay into the stormwater fund with all of their utility accounts, so in
No, I mean
a
extra.
roundabout
I mean,
way.
come on. I mean, get out your checkbook and write us a check. Yeah, you're contributing in your tax dollars, fine. So does everybody else. How about a little extra? Am I being unreasonable here?
No, I don't think you are. We talk about, we're kind of getting off track a little bit here, but we talk about what the city provides for the university, particularly in fire protection and other things, and we know where we get with false fire alarm charges and all of that. However, you were at the luncheon with the new president, and she seemed very receptive to cooperative discussions. So I think that would be an administrative function, not a legislative function, and they so chose to have that conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
I would certainly encourage it.
No, I agree. She's very amenable to
Yeah,
cooperating, so.
worth investigating, or worth deciding. No sale was ever made without asking. So give it a shot. Any other comments on this? All right. Well, Mr. President, that concludes the Planning and Development Committee meeting for this evening.
Excellent, thank you, Member Swank. We will be moving on now to City and Safety Services, chaired by Member Micah McCary, who is joined by Jeff Reisner, Alan Swank, and Jessica Thomas.
Good evening. We have one item on our City and Safety Services agenda for tonight, an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 25, Flood Damage Prevention, Chapter 25.01, General Provisions, Section 25.01.07, basis for establishing the areas of special flood hazard. I'll go ahead and read it because it is pretty informative, and then it's continuing our conversation about flooding. And our City and Safety Services Director may have comment following this preliminary review. But Section 1 reads that Athens City Code Title 25 Flood Damage Prevention basis for establishing the areas of special flood hazard is hereby amended as follows. Basis for establishing the areas of special flood hazard. For the purpose of these regulations, the following studies and/or maps are adopted. Flood insurance rate map for Athens County, Ohio, and incorporated areas, effective September 26th, 2024, as an updated date. Flood insurance study for Athens County, Ohio, and incorporated areas, effective September 26th, 2024, as an updated date. And other studies and/or maps which may be relied upon for establishment of the flood protection elevation, delineation of the 100-year floodplain, floodways, or delineation of other areas of special flood hazard. And I think I'll stop there because I think the details really just get at the overall point that we are trying to update our flood map. But Director Stone, do you have additional comments or information?
You captured it, Member McCary. It's updated maps, and for us to continue to be eligible to participate in the federal flood insurance program, our ordinance has to reflect the updated maps.
Thank you, and I do see that the past dates were 2009, so this does seem like an appropriate time to provide these updates. Do we have questions or comments from members of the committee? Councilmember Swink?
When we were talking about possible permanent structure for the farmer's market, one of the areas we're talking about is in what I thought was the floodplain. And I'm just curious, where are these new maps housed that we could look at? Are they online at the city website? Or?
They're on the FEMA website, and you can
FEMA,
zoom
okay.
in on the, but I will get the specific map. If you're interested, sir, in the area by the community center, I can get that specific map.
Yeah,
for you.
that'd be great, thank you.
Any other members of the committee before we go to other members of the council? Okay. Other members of council? Member Cloudfelder?
Similarly to Councilmember Swank, I think there might be a lot of people in the public who'd be interested in seeing these maps. I know I pay flood insurance, and my neighbors do as well, and I think people would be really interested in seeing updates.
Yeah, we can, I'll check with Scott and Ryan to see if this is something that we can pull from FEMA and get on the city's website and have it earmarked somewhere on there.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
If I can, I'd like to go back to the comment that was made about the, a potential farmer's market pavilion. Again, one of the plans, and probably the most responsible plan for any structure associated with farmer's market, would be a passive structure, which is permissible within, a 100-year flood area. To be able to put something as long as it's not obstructing the flow of water if we have a high water event. The other option would be, as we all recognize, is to build a foot above, which is rather expensive.
Director Stone, for clarification, does updating the flood map impact the insurance rates that folks pay for flood insurance? Would it change who has to pay for flood insurance, for example?
It depends.
Okay.
And it depends. So if you're in the old map and then you're out on the new map, then conceivably you could drop your flood insurance if you wanted to. You don't have to buy flood insurance necessarily. It's just like any other flood insurance. You have to buy it when the bank makes you. And so if you have your property mortgaged, almost all cases the bank will say, we're not going to give you a mortgage unless you buy the federal flood insurance. But as far as an individual who didn't have a mortgage on their property, it's up to them whether or not they would buy the flood insurance. With regards to your question, do they have to or not, depending upon if the map made them in or out? Yes, that would be a trigger.
Thank you.
If they had that mortgage.
Member Thomas?
So this could potentially move where the special floodplain
hazard
is
is.
versus the full floodplain
So
a little bit?
The special flood hazard area is the floodplain. So it's the
floodplain, okay,
100-year
special.
floodplain. There is a floodway, which is a more restrictive area. Typically, we don't have houses in floodway, but I can look and delineate where that is.
Am I thinking of just there's the area outside that's just the 100-year floodplain that's separate? It has typically a lower insurance cost because it's less likely? There's two tiers, aren't there?
Right, there's a 500-year, which is a 0.2% event, but that does not require you to buy flood insurance. And then there's the 1% chance area, which is the 100-year.
Okay.
And then there's the floodway, which has the extra restrictions if you build in that particular area, and that you have to demonstrate you're not causing a rise upstream. And so, with regard to cost associated with the difference between the floodway and the floodplain, it's probably something I need to check with an insurance broker on.
Thank you. Other questions from council members? Other comments from the administration? Members of the audience, any questions or comments? Please come forward and introduce yourself.
I'm Rob Delich, live on Morris Avenue in the floodplain, and I don't think that's changing. My status won't change, but it could change for some. I want to say, as a GIS professional, I went looking for the data, and I couldn't find anything useful. I couldn't even find good maps for this proposal, for this update. So I think it's very important that the city take the time to find the information and feed it to the public, because I spent my time this afternoon trying to find it. I could not FEMA's website and their data repositories are very poorly designed, let me say. And I used to work for an engineering firm that did the flood maps and provided them to FEMA, and we knew then that there were problems with that. FEMA's not very good at getting the information out, so spoon feeding it to the public would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments? Just on this topic. Thank you. All right, not seeing any, that will conclude City and Safety Services for the evening.
Thank you, Member McCary. We will now move on to the Transportation Committee, chaired by Member Spianis and joined by Member Clodfelter, McCary, and Reisner.
Okay, give me a second here. Thank you, President Crowell. We had to make some, for those of you who looked at the materials, there were some changes that needed to be made on it, so I'm gonna read from the corrected version, so you know.
I'm not chair anymore.
Yes, well, that's one.
Okay.
But there's some other things on there too. Some numbers didn't quite match up, so I'm gonna read the corrected ones. As you know, every year we look at how the streets are and which ones need to be paved and repaired. So this is the time this year where we're gonna look at that and decide which ones need some attention. So, whereas Ohio University is participating in the annual paving program and will contribute an amount, see they are helping now, commensurate with their share of the work, and whereas city administration will seek an amendment to this ordinance upon determination of that grant. So, section 1, Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to accept bids and enter into contracts with the lowest and best bidder for 2024 street paving and repairs project number 370. So section 2, the 2024 appropriation ordinance 130-23 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the following sums: $400,000 to the street fund, I won't go into the transaction codes, $200,000 to the state highway fund. Section 3, the service safety director is hereby authorized to expend up to $600,000 as follows: $300,000, wait a minute, $400,000? I think that need to be corrected too. Oh, no, that's, okay, I see, I think.
He's authorized to expend 600,000.
Yes.
400 from street.
Yeah, it says 300. Okay, 400 from the street fund, and then 200,000 from the state highway fund, 226. So anyway, I guess we have to decide which roads are going to be okay, which we're going to decide. So if anybody has any specific concerns about that, and wants to, can they put in their bid for please pave my street? Mayor?
I don't know as a seated council member that you necessarily want your street in front of your house repaved at this point in time. But what I will say is that what typically happens is that the Director for Engineering and Public Works or the city engineer goes and uses the same process that we have used, where we have a scale that goes from 1 to 9. And as I've mentioned to council in the past, a 1 would be a dirt path, which we don't have any of those in the city, thank goodness. But and then it goes up to 9, which an example of a 9 would be North 1804 Way or the new extension of Harold Drive. So, or Davison Court. Those would get a higher ranking. So we're looking at what is now kind of the typical, to where we have some 4s and 5s, and so we will certainly look at those that are in the most need for being milled and repaved or paved. We also do crack seal as part of this project, where we see a street that doesn't necessarily need to be paved or milled and paved. Instead, it can be crack sealed to preserve it for another 5 years plus. So once we have put that list together, we're always open to hearing from council members where you may see a street that we may have also seen, and in rare occasion, whoops, we never caught that one. But I would have to say that the Department of Engineering and Public Works does a great job of going around and identifying and knowing how to use that scaling, that rating system of what is in greatest need at this point in time of being milled and repaved versus crack seal versus leave it alone, or we do patchwork as well. They'll do some where they identify that there's seepage coming up on a city street, and it might require doing some milling, spot milling, and then repaving in that area too. The other thing that we've done in the past is what you've just read in the preamble of this ordinance and one of the whereases, where we work with Ohio University. It almost treats this as a way in which we can stretch our dollars further by having more projects within the scope of Ohio University's projects and the city's projects, which is almost like a cooperative purchase agreement, where we just have one contractor coming in and doing everything and not having to redeploy or having multiple entities coming in, deploying their equipment to do milling and paving or crack seal.
I have an addition on that. And one note on to that specific point. In the past, when we've worked with Ohio University and we've attempted to get some economy of scale, and that you basically put a larger project out on the street with the goal of driving down prices. That's why we've done it. The way we've done it is that Ohio University has given the money for their share to the city, and then the city has paid the contractor. In an instance like that, which I anticipate us doing it again, we'll have to come back to you after the bids when we've identified what that amount is and ask you to amend this ordinance to include their share, and then we would have that remitted to a particular fund and appropriated to spend.
Is there any sidewalk, crosswalk sort of thing involved with this at all?
We typically take, well, first of all, when we pave an area and we need to do ramps, we do the ramps in the area. So we carve out a portion of the paving money and we use it to do ramps in the vicinity of the area if they don't exist. There's also a project that's concurrent. That's that $1 million that we got for ODOT to do ADA improvements in general, primarily ramps, but also the walks that attach them. And that's an in-house project that our staff has been working on that we anticipate doing a little bit later this summer. That's a concrete-only project. It's atypical that we would do extended sections of sidewalk during this. A lot of times we get a better price if we just have an asphalt contractor come and bid, as opposed to them trying to be a general and do concrete work as well.
Well, obviously, the reason I'm asking, because I was on the pedestrian accessibility committee last year and whatnot, and we had some concerns and a priority list, and so this is perhaps slightly off topic, but are we making some progress with some of those priorities?
I think we are.
Okay. Any questions about any of this?
Any plans to do any brickwork?
We need to do brickwork on College in the section between Mill and Washington. Specifically, that's probably the targeted area. It really requires, it's going to take a significant amount of the street crew's time, but that's the one that I've identified right now. They've identified as well. They know they need to do it. It's just
That's a project that couldn't be contracted out.
I mean, you can contract it. It just, you're paying through the nose.
Right.
If you're doing that.
Understand.
So go ahead, sir.
I have to give a lot of credit to our street crews that do, pull the bricks, recompress the substrate underneath there and then put them back in again. So they do a great job. They know how to do it. They know the city. If you haven't noticed, now's a good time to just throw that plug out there that earlier this year, I asked for the street crews to pull the bricks and then put them back in again along College, in particular between Mill Street and Washington Street, because we had what almost looked like 3 or 4 speed bumps that were along there. So they have addressed that. They look fantastic. But I agree with Director Stone that, we need to continue on College Street. And then at some point, there's probably going to be another big project, which is going to be South Court Street from Park Place up to the intersection of Court and Union. That's a really challenging stretch of our brick streets. Another thing to share with council, in particular, those who are new, we actually have an ordinance that exists to where we cannot remove or pave over the Athens block in the uptown area. It's very prescribed as what we can and cannot do to maintain the historic integrity of our street. A lot of people, I'll stop there without going any further.
Okay, yes.
Director Stone, the bikeway, can you speak to any bikeway improvements in the paving project? I know that the bikeway will be closed near the new fire station, and that area will obviously be repatched. But also, I'm curious about the area, and this maybe is where we get involved with Ohio University again, BioBlenis, where the new sewer main is coming.
Right, thank you, President Crow. So, bikeway's closed right now, right by the Simpson Avenue Bridge for the new paddling and emergency access boat ramp to get installed. That should open back up by July. My hope is that it's earlier than that. Number two, Ohio University section. We are putting a sewer main into the section by the, basically from the Alco building, the Athens Lumber Company building on West Union Street down to Peden Stadium, and we will be adjacent to the bikeway there. Ideally, I'd like to repave that after that goes in. If there's any impact to the bikeway, it's a force main, so there's not a lot of cuts in it because there's no laterals that go into it. It's just a long linear stretch there. So, and then we do need to do the section east of the wastewater treatment plant. It was built in 2003. It's due. The section further out was built in 2007. It's due, or 2008. And that, at least a portion of that section can be done with TIF money, but that's not included in this ordinance. Once I pull together a project, but we may bid it with annual paving, but I'll seek an additional appropriation to do that. I think the county also might be doing some work.
The county is doing their section.
Yeah, so it's possible that we would tie in with the county, and I haven't talked to them yet.
There's a scheduled, I believe, to start in May and go through, member DeLocke, member of the Bikeway Committee, DeLocke.
DeLocke, live on Morris Avenue, and yeah, I'm secretary on the Bikeway of the Athens County Hocking-Adena Bikeway Advisory Committee. So, I lost my train of thought. Where were we, Sam?
I believe we got those dates recently from the county
Yeah,
planner, that I believe was May to
It
August
has
or
gone
something.
out to bid, so the resurfacing project for the county has gone out to bid, and those bids have been accepted. They could be starting work soon. They had to cut back what they're doing. They're not doing the entire 6 miles or exactly what it is, maybe more than 6 miles.
12, I think, yeah.
I think they're only doing 6, maybe that's what it is. Because the price kept going up and it had been delayed for years. ODOT was doing this. And because it was an ODOT contract, there really is no way for the city to get involved in the contract, unfortunately. But, and it's not a scrape and resurface. It's a fix the cracks and the bumps and then apply a new coat of sealant. So not a resurfacing per se. So just sort of improving the surface to enhance, extend the life of what's there for hopefully a significant amount of time. It's pretty rough in places, worse than the city's portion. Yes, I agree with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else, any other committee, council members? Audience? I see one person with their hand up. Come on down.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Hunter from 204 Elmwood Place, and I'm here representing the Pedestrian Accessibility and Bicycle Task Force. And we would just like to urge the city to pursue the list in the 2023 Pedestrian Accessibility Plan. Number 26, implement the ad hoc committee's prioritized sidewalk and accessibility project list. In particular, we want to bring attention to the goat tracks, so to say, between the Athens Public Library bike path cutoff off-ramp and the Stimson Avenue off-ramp. So right now, due to the fire station construction, that section of the bike path is not open, and that means that there is no accessible pedestrian route between those two places due to the poor conditions of the sidewalks in the neighborhood. You would have to go all the way out to East State Street, and even then, it's not really particularly accessible. And so we've already had 2 flooding events this year that have cut off the bikeway with that dip right there. And if this were a car road, it would have been fixed already. So we would like to urge the city to pave that goat track and create an accessible path. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any comments from the administration? Okay. That's it for the Transportation Committee.
Thank you, Member Spionis. We'll move on to Finance and Personnel, chaired by Member Reisner, joined by Mr. Wood, Ms. Clodfelter, and Mr. McCary.
Get everybody settled in. We have one item under Finance and Personnel Committee to discuss. It's an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title III, Administrative Provisions, Chapter 3.03, Executive, Other Officials, Section 3.03.21, Investment of Treasury Funds. This is an amendment to a ordinance that already exists. And if we go down from section 1 at 3.03.21, investments of treasury funds, paragraph B, the changes are: the city auditor is hereby directed to credit all monies earned in the city bank accounts and investments to the general fund of the city, funds for which the city of Athens except those funds for federal or state grants which prohibit earnings such interest, funds for which the city of Athens is acting as a custodial agent, funds that receive money derived from a motor vehicle license or fuel tax, bond funds that have been received and invested for a specific purpose project, or the principal of a non-expendable trust fund. In the case of those funds which are exception, the auditor is directed to credit all monies earned to the funds to which the principal sums of such deposits or investments belong. This shall be in accordance with Ohio Revised Code 135.21. I assume the auditor or treasurer would like to speak to this?
Sure, I think we both will. As you can see, our process of applying interest earned from all of our investments in our interest-bearing accounts has been in place for quite a while. According to this, it looks like July of 1991. And we have been applying interest to about 38 out of 60 funds every month based on the percentage prorated by the balance in their funds each month. And so you've heard from the treasurer before that we have been having record interest earnings in the last year or two. And so he questioned this, smart man that he is, a couple months ago, maybe a little bit longer. Anyway, so he did some research. I did a research. I had a file on interest allocation from before. And I took information to the law director, and we weren't all necessarily on the same page interpreting the ORC wording. We are now, but so it took us a little while to agree on how this should be handled. So anyway, this is the Athens City Code, which usually reflects the ORC pretty closely. And I feel like it's horribly out of date. and we would like to get in line. I also emailed our local state auditor's office, and it's pretty clear that we haven't been doing this right, and that there's a limited number of funds that we have to apply a portion of our interest to, and the majority of it goes back into the general fund. Of course, and the treasurer thought about this too, that, we're struggling, I think, somewhat with the general fund this year. I keep talking about it. And I'm hoping that this will help boost the revenue in that fund somewhat. There will only be about 5 or 6 funds, I think, that we apply this to. So I went back to the law director again the other day, because the treasurer and I have been talking back and forth pretty regularly. But anyway, we thought it would be a good idea for the treasurer to come up with the wording. So we gave it to him the other day, and he came up with it that day, and he's tweaked it. But I'll let him talk about the wording and what it means and the changes. Thank you.
Yeah, so basically when we talked about this, again, we just kind of started looking at the Ohio Revised Code and realized that generally in the Ohio Revised Code it said most monies would be deposited to the general fund. Our old system, actually, just to correct the auditor, we weren't really doing it wrong. If you think about it, you could credit all the money in the general fund, then the auditor would have the discretion to move those interest payments into the other funds. And that's basically, it seems as though in 1991, that was the decision that the city had made at that time. It's just to say, let's just make it a set system. We don't have to worry about it every month. What we discovered, though, is we're like, if we can just keep money in the general fund, knowing that some of our other funds, for instance, say water, sewer, transportation, have very healthy balances right now, can we apply more money from these interest payments into the general fund? So that's why I began researching this. That's where we came up with it. The exceptions, though, again, there are still things. Again, the auditor pointed this out today. There's really 5 of exceptions, and we have those in here. The federal funds, that's the first one. That has to be an exception. It would still have to receive its own interest. Funds for which the city is acting as a custodial agent. We have the Appalachian Community Grant right now that we hold. So any interest we accumulate on that goes straight to that fund. We can't put that in the general fund. If there's funds that are received from the motor vehicle license tax, those would have to be an exception. A bond proceed that we would take out, much like our fire station. Any proceeds of any interest I earn on that, we're going to keep that with that. And then, what was the last one? And then if there was a non-expendable trust fund. So there were 5 things we wanted to make sure that we had in this. And again, that keeps everything consistent with the Ohio Revised Code as well. Again, the whole point of this was last year we made a lot of interest. This year we will continue to make a lot of interest. I think last year we made well over $1 million in interest. I project we'll easily make that again this year. So our goal was to say, can we put some of this money back into the general fund as opposed to dispersing it through all the others? So that's the gist of what we came up with. We feel good about it. Again, we've talked about it. We've cleared it with the law director as well, and it looks like it's good to go.
Any questions from the committee? Member Clodfelder.
This sounds great for the general fund. I mean, it's kind of a relief to know that you've discovered a source of funding that might alleviate some of the tension we've all been feeling about the status of the general fund.
Right.
But it does mean that we're going to be taking money away from some other funds. Do you anticipate any pushback from the people who are in charge of those other accounts?
I don't think so, to tell you the truth. The other funds, a lot of the interest when you look, if you went down through every month when we distribute that, a lot of the funds have very small balances, so you're talking $10 here, $12 there. The larger funds that received a larger amount, again, when you go down through, you're talking about water and sewer, their balances are so high right now that this isn't necessarily going to affect them very much. So, yeah.
And is it the intention right now to make this a permanent change or a temporary one while things are tight?
Well, again, keep in mind, the way we interpret this, again, is that as the interest goes into the general fund, now it's at the discretion. As Director Stone mentioned last week at council, when money goes into the general fund, we know that we take care of our payroll, we take care of things like that. But we also have the discretion to move it to other funds.
Right.
If we see something is struggling from the general, we can go to water and sewer if we had to, right? But we can't go backwards.
Right.
So our intention with this is let's put the money started in the general fund. And then if, for instance, if we did need to move something, if there's something came up, we have the ability to do that. But if we put it over here first, we can't move it back.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Member Wood?
Materially, how far does this go towards digging us out of our little 6%, 7%?
Well, it just depends on the interest and how it comes in. I can tell you the reason I came up with this and the reason I wanted to do it, and we will probably ask for a suspension, probably by second reading. In May, we have a very large investment that will come due with Hocking Valley Bank. So in May, we're looking at between $400,000 and $450,000 that we can drop. Now, again, some of that will still have to go to some of these other small funds that we've already identified, but we will get a nice little bump into the general fund in May. You'll see it on your reports. It'll come through at the end of May. That money would get reinvested for another 6 months. So my hope is then at the end of November, I can do the same thing. So it could be a nice little bump.
Any other questions from committee? Oh, Mr. Mayor.
I don't have a question, I kind of have a follow-up to what the treasurer was just telling all of you, but Councilmember Wood, is I wouldn't think of it as pulling the city out of a hole. We're not in a hole. But what it is it's, I think, a smart way in which we're just sitting there having a level set as we look forward in time with revenue that's coming in, it's going into the general fund, it's keeping things a little bit more stable while we're able to see these interest rates as they exist right now. And so now's the time to do this, and do this for as long as we see these interest rates moving forward. We may reach a point to where the Fed is sitting there going, okay, it's time to sit there and start dropping these things, and so, or lowering the interest rates. I'm not gonna drop them completely, but you know, to use this as kind of a new model looking forward in time is not a bad way for us to be looking at these. When we knew that the interest rates were going up and that we have the ability to migrate some of this money into some interest-bearing accounts that are much better than we're seeing right now, you know, and I've thought about this for years. It's the smart and wise thing to do for any municipality, where you're making your money work for you, and then putting that money right back into whatever the fund line is, but to look at it from the general fund standpoint.
And again, the reason we've looked at it so much in the last year, again, is just simply because, like the mayor said, the interest rates are so high. When I took the position in 2022, I think we earned $130,000 that year in interest. So that wasn't a huge amount. But with the interest rates, I mean, literally jumped, 10 times compared to what they were in 2022. That's why you're seeing way more money available that we can now distribute.
Yes.
This is the nittiest thing I'm ever going to say from the dais, I promise. I don't know why it's tilting me, but half of it we say money's with a Y and the other half it's IE. Could we unify the...
Probably, yeah. Yeah, well, I'm sure we can clean that up.
Which is correct?
They're both correct.
Okay, well, in that case, why bother?
Because it's tilting me.
I think it was Wordsworth that said that inconsistencies are the hobgoblins of. Never mind, I won't go that far.
Lewis Carroll.
Was it Lewis
Small
Carroll?
fun.
No, I think it's Wordsworth. Oh well. You have a question? Just speak out. We're informal around here.
Okay. So you've talked about that we want to have that 7.5% to 9%. We want to get up to. It's going to help towards that. Where we get when I understand this correctly.
Hopefully it will. We don't really know how this is going to shake out until we start doing this, because we're applying our interest so differently to all these 38 funds, and it will be down to half a dozen or so. But yes, when we talk about our cash reserve, our fund balance policy, we are talking about the general fund.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that will help there somewhat at least. And I did have a couple other things I was going to add. I realize that we should probably put an effective date in here, which we can add to the wording before next Monday. And also to point out that, as the treasurer said, we weren't doing it wrong. We were following our city code policy, and we're not following the ORC policy. So now we'll be in line with the wording in the Ohio Revised Code. And Yeah, I think that's all I needed to add there. And it's based on the fund it varies. That's the other thing about trying to calculate what it will mean, is this is calculated every month after we get our bank statements. And so, and it's prorated based on the fund balance at the time. So if we've made a large loan payment out of a fund or something like that, you know, the balance that month will be lower, and things, there are things that will affect the balances. I mean, it changes almost every day, but not by a lot, but sometimes it will. And as I said, these are calculated at the end of every month. So it will vary how much we put in each fund.
Member Swain?
I'd like to go back to something the mayor said, and it kind of, and I'm sure he can relate to this. I know I can relate to it. He has children. I have grandchildren in that 10 to 12, 14-year-old range. This isn't like finding a piggy bank. Suddenly we can go to whatever our store of choice is for buying clothes, buy a whole new wardrobe. This doesn't get us out of the woods. This is just one step in getting us back to consistency. Because just as easily, we could have a catastrophic claim against the city. Heaven forbid it happen. And what we thought was, oh, we're up to 8, 9, 10%. Now we're back to 5 or 6. So this isn't a windfall. This isn't justification for going out and spending what some may consider an obligation. This is an effort to get us back smooth, even, and hopefully gradual increase. So we're not at 7%, but we're closer to 11, 12, 13% in the middle range. I was speaking to the auditor today. You go in for a blood test and the range for your sugar or whatever is 7 to 20. I don't want to be at 7. 20 may be a little high, but I'd like to be in the middle. Right now, I see this as a means of getting us with good investment back in the middle, and we can count on that. And I think the mayor's point was very well taken. This isn't a windfall. This is stability.
Any other questions? Audience? In that case, we're finished.
Thank you, Auditor and Treasurer. Appreciate it. Thank you.